If you are a content creator and you wish to master the art of storytelling, you wish to be a host at an international event, perhaps you wish to interview UFC athletes, you have come to the right episode. Jeremy, tell us that in the industry that is of acting and theater and UFC, it's a very diverse canvas. Don't you think so?
People need to understand that it started out with me being body shamed as a young man.
From that episode and from that particular incident and incidents like that, you have come a long way. Like, if I look at you right now, you talked about skin issues, acne, and you talked about body shaming, and but I think you're in the best frame right now. So so how did that transformation happen for you? If you are a content creator and you wish to master the art of storytelling, you wish to be a host at an international event, perhaps you wish to interview UFC athletes, you have come to the right episode, because in this episode we are interviewing Jeremy Durana. He is a Canadian actor, a musician, and a storyteller whose journey is nothing short of inspiring. His path to success wasn't easy, and we will touch base on all those points, all those challenges like bullying and body shaming and things like that. But if you are here for this experience of how storytelling can become your vehicle for transformation and how luxury and spirituality can coexist in a meaningful way, then you are in the right episode. Welcome, Jeremy. We are so honored to have you.
Neeti, I'm very happy to be here. You know, you gave me quite an extravagant introduction here. You hyped me up. Now I've got to live up to looking like one of those busts that you see, those artistic busts or those contrapost poses where they're, you know, you have to stand in a very distinguished manner. I don't think I'm worthy of all of that, but I greatly appreciate that introduction. And I can't wait to delve into these topics and this conversation. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. Jeremy, tell us that in the industry that is of acting and theater and UFC, it's a very diverse canvas. Don't you think so? So, how did you set the standards for each industry, and how did you thrive in that kind of competition, which is very diverse?
Yes. In order to delve into this topic, first thing we need to do is a little humility here. I didn't set the standards for anything, but what I will say though is I'm definitely trying my best to break boundaries, because in order to get into this conversation on a deep level, we have to hit the rewind button on the Jeremy Durana VHS tape and take you way back, playback here. Look, it didn't start off this way. Absolutely not. In fact, on paper, I shouldn't even be here having this conversation with you right now, Neeti. On paper, I wasn't really set up for success. I had to overcome a lot of obstacles in order to get to the point that I'm at. And let's make another thing clear. It's like I'm just scratching the surface. We're looking at the tip of the iceberg. I still have a lot more to do, and I've got a lot more mileage to go. So, but if we want to talk about how it all started out, you're talking about someone who had to, first of all, obtain and gain confidence. So when you listed all of those great things at the beginning of the podcast and a lot of the accomplishments and achievements, and you're trying to set things up for your followers or your viewership, people need to understand that it started out with me being body shamed as a young man. I battled childhood obesity when I was growing up. I'm talking, as a child, you're like 4'8" to 5'3", right? But I carried on that frame, I carried a 250 pound frame build. So that was a size 45 waist, 250 pounds. Genetically speaking, when we're looking at my family, we're predisposed to things like obesity and diabetes. So that's where I am at the starting point of this race. Okay, and to make matters worse, I lived in an area as well where I was the token guy, and by saying that, I don't want to delve too much into race and whatnot, but I was definitely an outcast where I lived. I know that for sure. I was the only colored family on the block, so that was another target. Bad skin. Okay, when you hear people talk about bad skin and acne, that was me as well. And then in terms of opulence, it wasn't like we came from a very rich background here. Very modest, working class. So another target was, we'd show up to school not wearing the fanciest clothing and whatnot. So we're talking about in any way that someone can emasculate you in a classroom, especially growing up in the era that I grew up in, because Neeti, believe it or not, I'm almost 50. So it doesn't, you might be wondering, well, how far back is this guy talking? I'm talking about far back. So I'm almost 50 years old. So when I was growing up in school, teachers shamed you, your classmates shamed you, and it was just a way of life. To take things even further, I remember my first day in high school, we're talking about phys ed. And look, I love this teacher. He definitely instilled value and character into me. But, my first phys ed class back in those days, when they wanted to make two teams, we had something called skins versus shirts back in those days, Neeti, which basically meant in a basketball game or football or whatnot, you had a group of boys with t-shirts versus a bunch of guys who had to remove their shirts. Now, I'm a teacher nowadays. I'm also a full-time teacher on top of everything else that you just talked about. We couldn't pull that sort of stunt today, okay? You can't write that into a lesson plan. Otherwise, you're fired. There might be a lawsuit, and you might be speaking to authorities as well for telling the child to take off their clothes in class. But in my day, my teacher, seeing my frame, as well as another classmate, we were both the heavy guys, he put us on the team where you had to remove your clothes. It was like, take off your shirts, and you're going to be on the skins team. And what made things even worse, Neeti, is that just a few yards away, you had the girls' gym class as well. So clearly, when the guys are taking off their shirts for the basketball game, girls will take a gander. They'll have to take a look at what's going on the other court. On my end, I was going to say there's nothing much to see, but no, there was 250 pounds to see. And on day one, Neeti, on day one in high school, I think my social life was totally killed, destroyed, whatever you want to call it. Look, it didn't leave detrimental psychological effects, but what it did was it definitely set me on a different course, different track.
But here I'd like to interrupt you. I mean, from that episode and from that particular incident and incidents like that, you have come a long way. Like, if I look at you right now, you talked about skin issues, acne, and you talked about body shaming, but I think you're in the best frame right now. So how did that transformation happen for you?
I'm really happy that you prompted me there, because that transitions into grit. Okay, like I said, I'm in school these days, and that's one of the things that I try to instill into the children. That's what the parents really appreciate about having me at the front of the classroom, is that I try to instill grit, tenacity, perseverance, everything that really builds character. And what did I do? That same phys ed teacher said, hey, if you want to trim down, first thing you need to do is just need to start running laps. So yes, that parlayed into me hitting the gym. I start to run a lap. I start to run the miles. In Canada, we call it kilometers over here. Okay, we do the conversion. Yeah. But I started to do a lot of that. Then I entered into the world of combat sports. I try not to get too emotional about this, because this is what saved my life. It was getting into amateur wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And what's funny is at the beginning of the conversation, you look so strong, and it's like it's time to talk about positivity. But when we delve into these topics, for some reason, it hits a chord, and it hits a chord with as if it was just yesterday. Like that feeling it's almost like I can remember everything vividly as if it was yesterday. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, I would like to talk to you about the jiu-jitsu aspect, because a lot of younger kids, especially teenagers, are and should be encouraged to pursue some sort of such combat exercises or some sort of sports like that. So how do you recommend that helped you in transforming your body and getting that that specific thing that was needed to come out strong in a society which was very racist at that time?
Yeah, I wanted to make it very, very clear that, first of all, in this interview, I want everyone to understand that I will not be leaning on any of these things as, as my escape card or my hallway pass. But what I will say is this. When I entered the dojo with my brother, Jason Durana, as well, who's involved in the same things as I am, we're both very unique in the sense that we both overcame obstacles, but we have similar interests. So when we both entered the dojo together, One of my first dojo trainers was out of Brazil. There's a very famous camp out there called Nova União, and his name was Wagner Fabiano, and he's one of the top Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. And the reason why I'm getting emotional is because we walked right into that dojo, and Neeti, I've been in schools as a teacher, I've been in churches, I've been in spiritual places, I've been in professional work environments, soccer, hockey. All of the isms do not exist in a dojo, okay? When you walk into a dojo, everybody's the same. There's no opulence. It's not about rich, not about black or white or any color. You take a bow when you get onto that mat. Mm-hmm. You shake your opponent's hand, and everyone builds a camaraderie. They accept you in. And I remember we started rolling, and I remember that was my first opportunity to build camaraderie with people who didn't judge you. And it's ironic because when you think of martial, or the realm of fights, if you want to call it that, there could be a stigma attached to combat sports. I didn't witness any of those stigmas or any of the negative connotations in that environment. That's the shocking part. In fact, that's what built me into the person that I am today. That's what built grit. That's what made me a person that could look at a problem and approach it from various angles, because fight and combat sports is a metaphor for life. It really is symbolic. It's emblematic of life. It truly is. And I'll give you examples. First one, forget about the physical transformation in the body and what it did for me mentally as far as building character. One of the first things that it did was it made me appreciate an opponent. Now you might be wondering, okay, is Jeremy talking about fighting opponents on the street? No. Absolutely, yes. If we're looking at it from the literal sense, yes, you never underestimate an opponent. But one thing that I was taught on the mat is to respect your opponent. Now, it's transferable when you start looking at it from a job interview, when you're looking at it from other candidates who might be running up against you for a job. We talked about performing arts, talking about other people that might be auditioning for a role. That's when you come out with your A game and you say, hey, on the mat, this person might be really, really strong, but guess what? I'm going to outplay this person with my mental acumen, my mental aptitude. I'm going to outdo this person or outperform this person as far as stamina goes. But when it comes to the job interview, sure, this person might be bringing variables X, Y, and Z to the table with their resume, but on mine, I've got X, Y, Z, plus I've got A, B, C. In other words, you're bringing more elements to the game. And that's what helps me outdo and outperform a lot of my competition. When I entered any field that I entered, and we were to look at statistics, the amount of applicants versus the amount of people that are called back, whether it was for the job at a school as a teacher, whether it was for a role on a show, or perhaps even in the corporate world, because I also worked in the private sector for 10 years before I became a teacher, which I've been doing for 18 years. And simultaneously, there was always acting, there was always interviewing athletes as well. It was almost like in daytime, I was this guy, and then at nighttime, I was another guy. But to do all of that, I had to add more bullets to my arsenal. I had to add more elements and more dimensions to my game. And that's what martial arts, I was about to say mixed martial arts, but that's what wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, Muay Thai kickboxing, that's what all of that instilled into my brother and myself. And the reason why I started talking about those other disciplines is because when we take a look at what goes on in, let's say, the octagon, UFC is, the number one or the prominent brand in martial arts.
Absolutely.
Sure, someone could come with an Olympic caliber wrestling background, highly decorated wrestler, and it's ubiquitous. It's a worldwide sport, so everyone around knows what I'm talking about when it comes to amateur wrestling. But then what happens when that person takes on someone who's bringing the same credentials as far as wrestling, but then they're also a great striker or they're great at kickboxing? That changes the game altogether. Well, that sort of mentality at a very early stage in the dojo was instilled into myself. And that's when you take those skills and you transfer them elsewhere, where you go, as a teacher, there might be a lot of behavioral issues in that classroom over there. I'm another teacher in my classroom. I don't have behavioral issues. Why is that? That's because I plug into X, Y, and Z. In other words, I bring other elements into the classroom that maybe the conventional person wouldn't do. So when teachers do that and students are impressionable, they observe everything, they soak in a lot of information like sponges, they start to observe that sort of thing. And that happened not just in the classroom, but it happened in the world of the corporate world that I worked in. It also worked in my favor as far as acting and television broadcasting goes. Now, you asked how did that help with acting, right? So
Yes,
I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, but before we jump into acting, I would like to ask you some of your memorable interviews with UFC athletes, or perhaps, some of your work in creating that web series. How did storytelling play a role in that, and how did your martial arts skills really help you in getting a connection with the people that you were interviewing?
Yes. So the first thing that we need to understand is this. People might be wondering, well, how did these opportunities even come upon me? Look, I'm coming from a background where we didn't have the convenience and luxuries bestowed upon us. In other words, guys like my brother and myself, we had to go out there and break down barriers for ourselves. So the first thing you do is you create your own platform. And one of the first things I did was I just created my own show called the Turnbuckle Club. Now, Neeti, oh yeah, it was called the Turnbuckle Club. It was really
an interesting name.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. It was called the Turnbuckle Club. It was called the Turnbuckle Club because the turnbuckle is a part of the wrestling ring anatomy. If you don't know what that is, if you look at the corner posts of a wrestling ring, there's these three ropes. Well, what holds that together is they call it the turnbuckle, and then there's like these little pads on each post.
Right.
You always see a guy climb to the post or something like that. But anyway, so we call it the turnbuckle. So it's a very insider thing. But here's the interesting twist. The interesting twist is, Neeti, I created that as a club, an extracurricular club at my school to get kids engaged, not with wrestling. We used wrestling, mixed martial arts, and boxing as a vehicle to have children get more engaged in reading. So we introduced them to literacy, biographies about these performers that they've seen time and time again, the marketing approach, teaching them how to read AC Nielsen ratings to understand how market share works when it comes to television and broadcasting, things like the marketing approach and how they reach their demographics. What exactly do they design it for products to reach a demographics? And that's what we're teaching children in elementary school as part of my extracurricular club. That's not even a part of the curriculum. That was something that we used elements of the curriculum, but we used that to have as a club that you'd hold during recess. So while you might hear about the choir club, or you might hear about sports clubs like the basketball team and the flag football team, which are teams that I've coached, by the way, I've also run the Turnbuckle Club with a friend. Now, because we're into spirituality and whatnot, we'll talk about how that club even came about. But what I'm trying to get at is you have to create your own platform. Now, by doing that, that's when I approached all of the big name organizations that you've heard of, whether it's the UFC, the WWE, boxing, WBC, World Boxing Council. When they had shows in Toronto, I would just approach them through the front door, telling them about my angle, which is I'm a teacher. We're working with children, and we'd like to deliver some messages to the children. May I have this interview? Now, the in all of this is before I became a teacher, I worked in television and broadcasting. So I remember keeping two things. I kept information, meaning like the contact information for everyone that I interacted with and crossed paths with in the world of broadcasting. And in broadcasting, I came across a lot of people in the sports realm, or that firmament. I met a lot of people within that realm of combat sports. So I kept in touch with them because I knew that one day in the future, I may have to go back to them and call in a favor, as we say. But what I did was we worked hand in hand. We promote their product, but at the same time, they help us with helping the children. And the children that joined the club were really at-risk students. So the students who had things going on behind the scenes, the extra luggage that they bring to school, they were the ones that were engaged. So it was through there that I then had a chance to build a rapport with these fighters and wrestlers and things like that. So one of my most memorable interviews, if we're going to go to the UFC, I'll go straight to a guy named George St. Pierre, GSP from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Je peux parler en français aussi, which means I speak French as well. So when I went to Montreal, I had a chance to go up to George St. Pierre. I met him on two occasions. The first occasion was he was in Toronto doing some media work, and I asked him to touch on something like financial literacy. I want to get his advice on financial literacy so that I can convey that to my students, because people don't realize that there's a staggering statistic out there that when pro athletes retire, there's some crazy numbers out there, like a high number of them within 3 years go bankrupt. And why? It's because of that lack of financial literacy. George St. Pierre's the anomaly. He's one of the few who was very astute with finances. And I remember him in his French accent, and I'm not trying to make fun, I just love it. I'm saying this with endearment. He said that, Jeremy, the question you're asking is a very important question. You must invest the money to make a money. And that was enough for me to then take that and teach children about what that really meant. In order to invest money, in order to make money, you've got to invest money. But that's something that he does. He has a lot of ancillary streams of revenue, and that's because of his acumen outside of the octagon. The second time I saw him, he didn't know that I was there, but believe it or not, I went to Montreal, and it was like the day after. It was either Boxing Day or it was January 2nd, but it was one of those days that followed a major Christmas holiday or a winter holiday, if you want to call it that. And I took a trip to the gym called TriStar. That's the dojo, the home of champions here in Canada. And I went there really with the intent to visit a friend, because I acted on a show where the founding father of that gym, he was on the same show that I was on. It was called The Listener. And I wanted to go visit him because it was a while after we shot, and I just wanted to drop in just to say hello and season's greetings and that sort of thing, and taking a class. My friend wasn't there, but I remember seeing in the corner, okay, out of 5 people at that gym the day after a major holiday, was George St. Pierre working on simple things like jabbing. The point of the story that I'm trying to make here is that that's what differentiates your pretenders from the contenders, and then your champions, okay? That's what a world-class champion, the best of the best, and debatably one of the ones that would go up on the Mount Rushmore of mixed martial arts. That's what he's doing the day after one of the major holidays, when everyone else is waking up from a night of partying, or they might have the proverbial hangover, or they're sleeping in, or they've got other things to do. There he was on that morning training at the dojo. And that's a story that I share with my students all the time. Now, I know that
I'd like to stop you here.
Yes.
And I am actually in awe with what you're doing, because I did not know about this aspect of your profession that you are actively teaching as well. What I feel is amazing about your dojo, perhaps, is that you are bringing in, of course, the celebrity guests that you are interviewing, but you're also inculcating in them other aspects which perhaps other dojos are not doing. For example, like you talked about financial literacy, and you talked about spirituality playing a big role. So from your background of combat sports to spirituality, that is a huge variation, and bringing that all in your school is something which is very, very inspiring and awe generating for me. So tell us more about that aspect, that how does spirituality play the role in you setting up that kind of school?
Yes, Neeti, this is the part where really you can't rely on a textbook, right? When you're talking about spirituality, and it's clearly the reason why I don't have this, at first I was just articulating my thoughts and I was firing off my thoughts. Now we're talking about something that's just greater than I am, and I'm so insignificant in that world that all I can say, Neeti, is that we are put on this planet for a reason, and our coordinates, they intersect for specific reasons. And guess what? Things manifest and you never know why. Things play out, and it takes about 10, 20 years for things to finally play out for you to realize why you were put on this planet or why you met somebody. I'll tell you a quick story, and I'll try to make it fast because it's not really quick, but but I can't share the story without alluding to this example.
Mm-hmm.
When I became a teacher and I finished teachers college, I entered teachers college at a time when the market was actually oversaturated. We didn't have enough jobs for teachers. I took a gamble on myself. So you might hear people say betting on themselves. I left the corporate world after 10 years, and that was, well, 8 years to be specific, actually. After 8 years, I left and I took a gamble on myself, and I achieved a certain, level in the corporate world that a lot of people my age, from my demographic, my color at that time, I was one of the few that slipped through the cracks. So what I'm trying to get at is I left a particular level that most people wouldn't have, because it took me a while to get there. But Mark Twain once had a quote, which was, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you realized why. And I realized one day that I was actually put on this planet to work with children and to teach. And I remember finishing teachers college, and I didn't even have a chance to attend my commencement, which basically is our graduation. Mm-hmm. And I already had a job offer waiting for me because I had French as my background. I came in with a tech background. I had a computer engineering background, computer sciences, web development, you name it, anything under the world of tech, like for computers. I had that was my degree, but I finished off my computer studies in French. So I wasn't doing web designing in English, or I wasn't doing database, not database, but like networking in English. I was completing them all in French. So I had the French background, and I had a math background because math goes hand in hand with computers. So I had everything that they wanted for teachers at that time, people with that the skills under STEM. They call it STEM now, but I just call it technology. I had that, plus I had the second language. There's a shortage of French teachers. Mm-hmm. I coach sports. There's a lot of boys that go to school and there aren't enough coaches. I coach sports. So I hit everything under, I nailed a lot of I was able to check off a lot of boxes. I also have a musical background too. So these are things that I was able to lend myself to at the school. Now, when I got to a school and I started teaching there, I took on a contract, and after at the conclusion of my contract, I was looking for something a little closer to my home. So I went to another school closer to my home. Now, the school that I left, they offered me, they said, Jeremy, we really like you. The kids like you. Can you stay? And I said, I really appreciate that, but I want to look for something a little closer to home. And I did. And keep in mind, there are thousands of teachers in the system looking for jobs. And there was another individual who took that role that I vacated. I left the school, and that person fulfilled that spot that I left. Most people wouldn't know, I wouldn't even know this under normal circumstances, but I'll tell you how I found out about this individual who occupied my spot. I started teaching at my new school, and I was talking to somebody, a caretaker actually. The caretaker would chit-chat with me in the room because, believe it or not, one of the things that the dojo instilled in me was cleanliness, okay? I clean my place like it's, I just clean my place. Let's put it this way, cleaning day was 5 minutes ago, and it's gonna be 5 minutes from now. So when you enter my home, my dojo, my car, you can eat off the floor, and that's not a joke. When you walk into my classroom, students and parents respect it because they notice that we take care, and they know that there's a respect for the environment. So what I'm trying to get at is the caretakers would always talk to me about, the cleanliness of my room, and we'd chat. He asked, what are you doing this weekend? And I said, well, my brother and I are going to be watching WrestleMania, and it was a wrestling event. And the teacher that overheard that approached me and said, hey, I didn't know you were into that sort of thing. Do you think we should start a club for kids around here? So I left, and guess what? My intuition was correct, because the individual who filled that spot had the exact same issue that I was worried about. Things that had that consternation, things that I was apprehensive about. Well, he ran into those issues, and they ended up placing him into the school that I started teaching at. So he overheard this conversation, and we just created this club called the Turnbuckle Club. And when we ran this club, that's when I reached out to Carl DeMarco of the WWE, my brother, who was running a cinema at the time, and they used to air sporting events at those theaters. So he'd always give me passes. My brother would give me passes for children. And Carl DeMarco, who was the vice president of WWE in Canada at the time, I reached out to him, and he would provide me with the information for people at Stamford, Connecticut, which was the head office for WWE, to get tickets for children. I just wanted merchandise, like T-shirts and magazines and some toys. they went a step further. They said, "Don't worry, we'll have your tickets at will call at that time it was called the Air Canada Centre. Now we call it the Scotiabank Arena here in Toronto. But it was for their Monday night broadcast called Monday Night Raw, which is going to be on Netflix very soon. It's a very big thing now. It's blown up, but uh, they reached out and they gave us tickets. Now, where I'm going with all of this is like, like I mean, academics is really why we should be at school. But what will happen is you find that children will go to school because they enjoy the drama club. They might like art. They may like sports. And in this particular case, for these at-risk kids, their safe space was the club that I ran, myself and my colleague. Right. And I found out that this one child came. Now, here's where things get interesting, Neeti. Where things get interesting is this child wrote a very heavy note saying that, things are very hard at his house. And there's a lot of things going on in his household that made him very depressed. And one of those things was the two people that he loved the most in his life, they had died recently, and those were his grandparents. Now, back in that era, in 2008, the grandparents that he's referring to were grandparents who went to a resort, a Mexican resort, and they were slain there. They were killed in their hotel room. I will not name drop, just out of respect for people, but I mean, if we look at like the chronological timeline of events, and right. people really want to do research, they could find it because these are all national news items. But his grandparents were killed at that Mexican resort, and that was one thing that kept him going was that wrestling club that we ran. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those nuggets, those droplets from the divine, from the higher up. And it doesn't matter. I don't know what you believe in or what people believe in, but whoever it is that you believe in, that was just more reaffirmation that, there's something bigger than us. That's for sure. There's reasons why we're on this planet. And that was just one instance where I knew that I was where I was supposed to be at that time. Like I was meant to be there at that moment. That was just confirmation that, I didn't make a mistake by leaving the job that I had in the executive world where I was working in the boardroom. This is just reaffirmation that I was meant to be here. Now, if you want to take a step further and find out a little bit more about it, I'm just trying to say that the world is a lot more close-knit than we think it is. We're a lot closer than you believe. The whole 6 degrees of separation, I truly believe in that. And it's true. You drop a pebble into that lake or that body of water, it will create that ripple effect. And we're all interconnected in very unique ways. And that's coming from someone who, up until recently, I've had some things happen in my life, and I'd have to say I was spiritually broken. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not an expert on that topic. And if someone like myself can nod and say, okay, there's clearly something that's bigger than us, then I can see what it would be like for people who are more in tune with that world of spirituality.
Absolutely. There's so many people and with so much of experience, the spiritual gurus who know so much more than us. We are just absolutely newbies in this. But the thing is that we are trying to explore the concept of spirituality and what luxury really means to people in terms of their profession, in terms of their businesses, and how is it playing a peaceful role, an abundant role in bringing that sort of peace of mind so that they are able to sustain what they're doing and help them go forward with it for a longer time. Is that something which is true for you, which is perhaps true? Because what I've heard from you, from your profession, from your school and your stories, it seems like spirituality has played not only a major role in your life, but also in the role of how you have influenced the students that have come across your path.
Absolutely. I completely believe in that. And, when you wake up in the morning, and in my case, I've been more recently just getting on my hands and knees and praying, but I thank the higher up every day for the opportunity that's been given to me. I also ask for the clarity, the mental clarity, so that I could I could act in a certain way throughout that day to lead people down the right path, or at least to use virtues to teach a group of people. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, believe it or not, there's just that one little thing. It's just a little sound bite that a child needs to hear that can actually become a change in the direction. That can be a catalyst in their direction, and that can affect their trajectory And sometimes that little tidbit that you're saying, it's not directly related to the class. It's not directly related to the curriculum or a lesson per se. It could just be an offhand comment. So I'm always asking for just the wisdom to be able to say things the right way, to lead people down the right path, because we all make mistakes and we all say things. And in a classroom with wisdom, with the proper virtue and the proper mindset, and that's what I ask for, because we don't know what that tidbit of information, that soundbite or whatever I say that to a child, what that might manifest to 20 years from now. I've always said to my students, especially after some of the calamities or the catastrophic events that you see in the news when it comes to what happens in schools, the next day I tell my students, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can stay in 5 minutes at recess, we'll have a conversation. I'll reassess some of those assignments if you'd like to take a look at it. We'll do a reappraisal. I don't want something to happen 20 years from now when I'm at the grocery store in the chips aisle and I turn around and I realize that you've got something to settle. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. It's just how we can use our spirituality, how we can pull from a more divine being to have them to influence us to do the right things at the right time for a vulnerable sector like children. That's definitely one group for sure.
Right. So in terms of your life, like you have talked about your background in computer sciences and then pivoting to other areas. So how did acting happen for you? How did you step into the world, and what advice do you have for people who wish to pursue theater or people who wish to pursue Hollywood acting, perhaps? What is the 2 or 3 nuggets that you'd like to talk about in terms of acting?
Yes. So here's the thing. When you're coming from a brown household like mine, you don't tell your parents you're going to become an actor, because you'll be finding a slipper or a pot spoon or something coming at you right away. So we had to work with a lot of parameters in my household, okay? You have to go to school and follow a certain template. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to, but in my case, guys like my brother and I had to. So my brother, he was criminology, law. My case, it just so happened to be under the world of technology, whether it was engineering or if I could have gone into medical science, I could have. The grades weren't there, but my interest would have been in computer sciences. Now, what people need to know is this. Sure, if you're pursuing a certain discipline, in this case, computer science, but the degree was called informatique, because that's how you say computer sciences in French, by the way. That was the degree. And mathematics, you always have to keep your creative side alive. You cannot let that fire extinguish. Your creativity has to be there. Whether you're playing a guitar, you're playing a piano, you like to the fine arts, illustrations, they are more engaged with, film editing. The technology is so intuitive now that it's just easy for everyone to tap into their creative side. And I never let that extinguish, regardless of what anyone around me said. And one of the mistakes I made as a child was I tell people about everything I want to do, and you don't realize that, you have a lot of naysayers, because there's a lot of people who really accomplished nothing or not a whole lot, or they failed at what they tried to achieve. So what do? They try to extinguish your fire, your flame. Right. So what I did was, sure, I continued to pursue computer science. I had to make the parents proud. You got to give them something to boast about, Neeti. That's how it goes. When the parents have to meet their relatives at family functions. But in the background, the interesting dichotomy here is that, sure, I was doing something that was just very logic based, but then on the other end of things, I tapped into my creative side. That meant you buy your own camera. It means we buy our own computers. My brother and I, we both did jobs at very young ages, like the newspapers and store jobs, and worked at a theater. So we funded everything on our own, by the way. Just want to let everybody know that we funded everything from our schooling, our tuition, our first cars that we ever purchased. Everything was just on our own dime. We did it on our own. And we bought the computers for post-production purposes, basically like to edit. And my brother and I took a trip out to Kingston, Ontario. And now, if you don't know what Kingston, Ontario is, that's where our penitentiary is, like our major one. That's the penitentiary called. It's called Kingston Penitentiary, known for housing a lot of Canada's most notorious criminals. And my brother and I just kind of showed up. We're a couple guys who know nothing about credentials and clearance. We just start to walk around and film and talk about the historical aspect and just drop tidbits of information on our own guerrilla style documentary. We were actually then escorted out. When I say out, it means like we were told to get off their property because we were there filming and just doing an education piece.
Right.
And it was from there that we use that as we use those skills for student films at school. We start to then create student films at school, and from student films that you'd make at school for projects, you then start to associate and socialize, interact with other people who have similar interests, who then tell you about a theater club, or they tell you about casting agents, or they tell you about certain agencies that are looking for people with certain skills, and then before you know it, your hobby starts to turn into an interest with a lot of financial benefits. Now, I'll tell you the main point here. The main point is this is a classic case where if you follow your heart and you follow some of your passions, this is the passion of mine, and my heart was in the right place. I didn't do it for money. Believe it or not, things follow. Money follows. This is an example here where after we made that Kingston Penitentiary documentary, something happened with someone who held a high position within the Army here. He committed a major crime against women, and what happened was when he was sentenced to solitary confinement, I remember getting a phone call. This was after a day at school of teaching. I remember receiving a phone call, and it was the news outlets. They called us up because they wanted to get some people that knew about that jail that could talk about it and share expert opinion. Now, I picked up that call, or at least looked at that voice message an hour and a half after the call. So you know how the news works, the news cycles, we knew people right away. So they ended up reaching out to some professor. But we were the first ones that they reached out to. So that put us on the radar. That got us on the map. What's interesting is years later, my brother and I still following our passions. My brother ended up winning an award for the best Canadian documentary as far as independent films goes in Toronto. He won that. And the same year, I was at that exact same prison, Kingston Penitentiary, working on a show called Mayors of Kingston. It's starring Jeremy Durana, by the way, and it's on the Paramount streaming network. But I was there working on the very grounds that I was escorted and told to get off of years prior. Here we were, years later, where my brother's winning an award for his documentary called "The Show Must Go On," and in my case, I'm working on a show that's well known, and then we wonder about why we're placed there. Now, the interesting relationship that I made that day on set led to this book right here that I have called Mighty Joe Mewey. It led to someone who was pivotal in helping me create this book. He was there just doing research on the jail because he had to write an informative piece for the local newspaper, and he decided to try to get on as a background actor. And he was there just asking people questions about the industry, and I made a relationship with someone named Andy Curtis. He's a professor in Macau and University of Anaheim, and also he used to be he was the former president of an organization called TESOL. It's an organization taught for teaching people how to become qualified English as a second language teachers. He was a former president of that organization, but he was there that day, and I built a very strong rapport with him, which led to a book. Now, did I go to Kingston Penitentiary with that in mind? No, I did not. Another thing too, going back to the dojo, taught me grit. Neeti, you need to know this, and your viewers need to understand this as well. It's not like I just showed up to Kingston Penitentiary to do that show. The way it works is when you're working on a set, on a professional setting now, like the mayor of Kingstown, Toronto to Kingston is about a 4-hour drive, so people don't see this. They don't see the grind of me waking up around midnight to get onto a shuttle at 1 a.m. to arrive to Kingston Penitentiary at 5 a.m. At that point, you get processed. You do all the legal work, you get hair and makeup done, you then throw on the jumpsuit or whatever the wardrobe is for the day, and then you work 12 to 14 hours. After that, you hop on a shuttle, you come back, and before you know it, the 24-hour clock, you just went through a 24-hour cycle. And that's when my day begins at the gym around 1 in the morning. Nobody sees that grind. They look at an end product.
And then you go to the gym.
Yeah, that's right. You got to go to the gym. And that's because the dojo instilled this in me. And once again, when you're younger and you face all the obstacles that you face, there's that fear of going back to those childhood days. Like, in my case, I can gain pounds very easily, especially during the holiday season, with all the food that's available.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, you go to the gym right after.
That fear actually worked in favor of you because you sort of worked on it in such a way that you were motivated, inspired to work out.
Yes. Fear is a motivating factor. I'm not saying that that's something that should be instilled, but I know that in my case, boy, that's what it ended up, translating into. For other people, it's not like that. The softer approach is probably the best way to go. But for individuals, and I'll just have to say it the way it is, there's a lot of people these days, especially a lot of the boys, a lot of guys, a lot of people, just people in general. A rigid regimen and discipline needs to be instilled. Like, that approach needs to be implemented in order to get the job done. Otherwise, the results just don't manifest by themselves. Okay, you really have to put the work in. People don't want to see it.
Right. See, there are stories about people who have lost weight and cannot keep it up after a couple of months, and then there are stories of people, probably like yourself, who have kept the weight away for a longer duration, right? And do you think that only the physical workout really plays a role, or is it the mindset tuning also that really works in?
That's an amazing question. I'm glad you're actually touching on this, because I forgot about that. My goodness, when you are not in the game mentally, and in the game, I'm using that as figuratively speaking here, when your mind is not set right, and there's not the calmness isn't there, and that peaceful tranquility is not there, it's almost like useless showing up to a gym or a dojo or anywhere really. So absolutely, you have to find a way to achieve that mental calm, that peacefulness. You need to do that, whether that's through meditation. You asked about people that I spoke to, and when I interviewed one person, her name was Trish Stratus, a very famous performer for WWE.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Richmond Hill, Ontario, Canada, so there's a commonality of us being Canadians. I didn't ask her about wrestling, I asked her about yoga, because she opened up her own yoga studio here called Yoga Stratosphere. And what I'm trying to get is, what I took from her is pretty much what I'm conveying here is, whether it's yoga or it's Pilates or meditation, praying, if one cannot achieve that tranquility and that calm that they need for that inner peace, it's very hard to do everything else, whether that's working out in the gym and doing something effectively, running, lifting weights, punching a bag, working with a partner in a sparring session in a dojo, or just accomplishing a task at work. And it could be the most mundane task. Neeti, I had one of the most challenging instances occur about 4 months ago in my life. And for me, for most people, they'd have to take a year off and do some sort of retreat in order to rebound. It took me a few months to do this. I had to make a phone call to the important people in my life that could help me achieve this, but they got me back in touch with spirituality. The first thing people looked at, from friends to the pastor, and being part Brown, we have a pundit on the Rolodex as well. He looked me in the eye and said, "Brother, you're spiritually broken. You're not there spiritually." And he was right. What happened was, I was so consumed with just trying to achieve goals that, from a spiritual end of things, I neglected that. It's not that I ignored and didn't realize that spirituality didn't exist. It's just I just fell into that trap of, I've got goals X, Y, and Z. I've got bills X, Y, and Z to take care of. This is what I need to do. But nope, I needed to get back in touch with the divine, and I'm very happy that that's the path that I'm taking right now.
So you mean to say that even in the midst of the entire burnout feeling, you were still put in touch with your spiritual side, and that is the way to progress, even in the kind of combat sports you do, or anything in profession that you do in corporate world, anywhere, it is the spirituality first and then take the action.
Absolutely, it is. It is. It's definitely an important component towards one's success. Now, look, I'm not the poster boy for the elite success. I mean, we all know that there's very successful people out there. But based on my starting point and on paper, if we were to take a look at the number of things done with what I had to work with, the tools I had to work with, yes, I can lend credence to this topic and say that that's very, very important. And that's one area that I'm right now working on. The best part about it is it doesn't cost money. It doesn't cost money. It's just all about your time and your dedication and your belief in something.
While you have a lot of humility about what you have done and where miles to go before you sleep, but I just feel that you have some important nuggets that you've shared in this podcast, and I think I would like to close this one with one important aspect, which is what advice would you give to someone struggling with self-doubt or burnout in creative fields? Advice would you think is the right one if they really want to make it big?
Yes. Yeah, Neeti, you're right. Look, I kept track of every audition I've ever done, and we're up to hundreds at this point. At this point, rejection is just another day in my life. So it's to really sit down and take the moment and the time that you need to really concentrate and focus on yourself. Be very thankful for what you have. Neeti, this past year was one of the toughest. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, in the field of creativity, I think rejection is something which comes hard hitting, and because you go with all those eyes that okay, I'm the best and I am going to be making into Hollywood and things like that. But often with people, what happens is that first blow comes at you and you're out of the game. So how to handle that kind of rejection and keep going at your craft is what I'd like to understand from you, because you having the background of the combat sports, UFC, all that kind of thing, how does that make one stronger, really?
Oh, the key component here, Neeti, really is two things. One is never take things personally. Okay, that's the first thing. Never take things personally.
How?
And secondly, in our world of school and teaching and pedagogy, which is basically our philosophy of teaching, everything's just a teachable moment. So in this case, when we're talking about the realm of acting and rejection, you learn from those mistakes. You never take things personally. And what I've done to casting directors is I've always asked, okay, where exactly did I falter here? Where's my shortfall? And what should I work on? And always hone the skill and hone the craft. Continue to work at those habits and that trait and hone your skill. So even when you're experiencing the burnout, you can take one element and continue to just hone it and work on it. So if there was burnout in, let's say, acting or whatnot, it doesn't mean that I walk away from it altogether, but it means I spend several hours just working on the piano, or I work several hours on the languages. We talked about languages earlier on. Think of a skill that you obtain. Think of that as an investment, and everything that you can build upon those foundational skills or that discipline is compound interest. So when I learned French, Neeti, I was able to attain and acquire Italian, Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese as a result. That's because it came from one Latin derivative language. When it comes to computers and math, I'm my own financial guy because the math skills are already there. Now I can do the others. So same thing with art and same thing with acting and music. If you've got a certain skill, you can still build upon it. Don't walk away completely. Just continue to hone and act and just treat the matter as an opportunity to just build upon little skills and just sharpen those skills. And that's going back to what I said. When I said Georges St. Pierre, the UFC, he was the welterweight champion of the world. He left undefeated, by the way. He was just working on the first move that you typically learn in a boxing class meeting. Okay, this is a world champion just working on a basic move called the jab, and that's what he was doing on his day off. And he was burnt out, by the way. well known for actually leaving for an extended period of time for this exact same reason. Mentally, it took a toll on him. So that's one of the things that I can say. And don't walk away from it. There's an old saying, I think Denzel said this. It was like, if you wait long enough from the barbershop, you'll eventually get a cut. So same thing in any of the fields that we're talking about. And same thing with Einstein, right? I'm just paraphrasing what he said. Einstein said something along the line of, he wasn't the smartest, but it's just that he was the most persistent. Like he just continued to toil and work away at a problem. He didn't say those exact words, because I know that we have viewers who'll say, he didn't say that. But I'm just paraphrasing the concept here. And same thing, whether it's in the film, whether it's a particular field or a discipline or a job that you're trying to find your home in.
Right.
Continue to work at it, and your opportunities will come. If your heart's in the right place, they will. They will.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been wonderful chatting up with you and touching so many topics, and especially the inspiring moments in your career. And this is for the viewers of Luxury Unplugged. So you might have seen today that Jeremy's story has proven that you can be a star in your own niche. You can really inspire, and you can teach through your own style of storytelling. And the lessons over here that we learn today are in persistence, in adaptability, and resilience, and the courage to share your truth no matter what, no matter where you are in your journey. So if you like this episode, like, subscribe, and comment below, and share your thoughts with us. Keep coming back for more. Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you.
All right.